Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of Terra's Pride, watching the massive space station grow larger through the viewing window. The station was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. It was made of some kind of glowing crystal that twisted and curved like frozen music. Ships moved around it without engines, floating like leaves on invisible wind. "Sir, we are receiving docking instructions," said Communications Specialist Choi Nayeon from her station. Her voice was tight with nervousness. "They want us to use Docking Bay 712. Minho nodded. "Take us in slowly, Nayeon. We don't want to scratch their pretty station with our ugly ship." Chief Engineer Park Suman looked up from her console. "Captain, their docking system is trying to take control of our ship. Should I let them?" "No choice," Minho replied. "We are guests here. Very unwelcome guests." The Terra's Pride was humanity's best ship, but it looked like a metal brick compared to the alien vessels around them. Where the alien ships were smooth and graceful, the human ship was all angles and armor plating. Where alien ships glowed with soft energy, the Terra's Pride had bright lights and visible exhaust ports. Tactical Officer Kim Hyunwoo watched the scanner readings. "Captain, I count at least 50 different ship designs out there. Some of them are bigger than our space stations back home, and probably older than our entire civilization," Minho said quietly. The docking process was smooth but cold. Robotic systems guided their ship into a bay that was clearly designed for something much more advanced. Warning lights flashed as Terra's Pride settled onto landing supports that had to adjust for the ship's primitive design. "Welcome to Centralis Station," came a voice through their communication system. The voice was beautiful, like singing crystal. "Please prepare for formal greeting procedures. Bring no weapons. Bring no recording devices. Bring only yourselves." Minho straightened his dress uniform. It was the best Earth had to offer, but it felt rough and crude compared to what they would soon face. "Suman, you have the ship. Hyunwoo, Nayeon, you're with me." The airlock opened to reveal a corridor that seemed to be made of light itself. The walls glowed softly and the floor felt warm beneath their boots. Everything was perfectly clean and perfectly quiet except for the sound of their footsteps. A figure approached them from the far end of the corridor. It was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal. The light from the walls seemed to dance inside its transparent body. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once. "I am Chancellor Vextar of the Vorthak people. Welcome to the Galactic Federation. Young ones." The word young was said in a way that made it clear this was not a compliment. "I am Captain Lee Minho of the Earth vessel Terra's Pride," Minho replied, offering a formal bow. "We are honored to meet you." "Yes, I am sure you are," the Chancellor said. Behind the crystal being, other figures emerged from side passages. One looked like it was made of flowing water held in a vaguely human shape. Another appeared to be a cloud of sparkling dust that somehow held together. "Come," Chancellor Vextar said. "The Council wishes to examine you." They were led through corridors that defied human understanding of architecture. The walls curved in impossible directions, and sometimes they seemed to be walking upside down without feeling any change in gravity. The alien technology was so advanced it might as well have been magic. The council chamber was a vast sphere filled with floating platforms. Representatives of 12 different alien species occupied these platforms, each one more impossible than the last. At the center of the sphere, 3 platforms waited for the human delegation. "Behold," announced Chancellor Vexitar to the assembled aliens, "the metal workers of the 3rd spiral arm." Laughter filled the chamber. Not cruel laughter, but the kind adults might make when children showed them finger paintings. It was somehow worse than cruelty. "They still use combustion to move through space," said the water being, whose voice sounded like a babbling brook. "How wonderfully primitive." "And look at their weapons," added another voice from a creature that looked like a small star. "Kinetic projectiles. They throw rocks at their enemies." Explosive chemical reactions, chimed in something that appeared to be a geometric shape floating in mid-air. "They blow things up like children with firecrackers." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Minho felt his face grow hot but kept his expression neutral. Beside him, Hyunwoo's hand moved unconsciously toward where his sidearm would normally be. Nayeon stared straight ahead with rigid dignity. Now, said Chancellor Vextar, raising one crystal hand. "We must not be unkind to our new friends. They have traveled very far with their simple technology. 300 years to cross 50 light years," added the water being. "Remarkable persistence, indeed," agreed the Chancellor. "Which brings us to why you are here. The Galactic Federation has decided to offer Earth-protected status. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing legal documents written in flowing alien script. Human translations appeared beside the alien text. Protected status means you will be safe under Federation law, the Chancellor explained. Your worlds will be marked as preserve areas. No advanced species will interfere with your development. Like a zoo, Yenwu muttered under his breath. What was that? Asked the star creature. My officer asks what responsibilities come with this protection, Minho said smoothly. Responsibilities? The Chancellor's crystalline form seemed to brighten with amusement. Oh, there are no responsibilities. You simply continue to exist as you always have. We ask nothing of you because there is nothing you could provide that we might need. Surely there must be some way we can contribute to the Federation, Nayon said. Speaking for the first time, the chamber fell silent. Then the laughter began again, louder than before. Contribute? Wheezed something that looked like a plant, crossed with a machine. What could metal workers possibly contribute to civilizations that transcended metal millions of years ago? Perhaps they could provide entertainment, suggested the geometric shape. Their war films are quite amusing. All that running around with projectile weapons. Or their music, added another voice. So wonderfully chaotic compared to proper harmonic mathematics. The humiliation was complete. Humanity was being offered membership in the galactic community as a curiosity, a primitive species to be preserved and observed like animals in a sanctuary. We are grateful for the Federation's generous offer, Minho said, his voice steady despite the burning shame he felt. We will need time to consider the terms. Of course, said Chancellor Vextar. Take all the time you need. There is no urgency. After all, what could possibly threaten the Federation that has maintained peace for 3,000 years? The other council members murmured agreement. They had solved war, poverty, and death itself. They had technologies beyond human imagination and wisdom accumulated over millennia. What could a species that still used metal ships and explosive weapons possibly offer them? As the human delegation was escorted from the chamber, none of the aliens noticed the expression on Captain Minho's face. It was not shame or anger, but something else entirely. It was the look of a man who had just been challenged in a way that made him dangerous. Behind them, the council continued their discussions about trade routes and cultural exchanges, confident in their superiority. They did not know that across the galaxy, in the dark space between stars, ancient sensors had detected their energy signatures. They did not know that something vast and hungry had been looking for exactly this kind of advanced civilization for a very long time. The galaxy's mockery of humanity would soon become the least of their problems. 3 years had passed since humanity received their place as a protected species. The title felt like a collar around their neck. Human colonies grew slowly under Federation watch, always supervised, always limited. Every request for technology was denied with polite smiles and gentle words about protecting primitive minds from dangerous knowledge. Dr. Kang Tai-hyung worked in the deepest levels of Luna Base. Far from any Federation sensors, the hidden research facility was humanity's best-kept secret. Here, away from alien eyes, human engineers pushed their crude technology to new limits. Show me the test results, Tae-hyung said to his assistant. Han Su-young pulled up holographic displays showing weapon performance data. The new railgun design exceeded expectations. Projectile velocity is now 0.7% of light speed. The fusion warheads are 30% more efficient than our previous models. Good, but not good enough, Tae-hyung muttered. The aliens treat our weapons like toys. We need something that will make them take notice. In another section of the base, systems analyst Lim Dong-yun worked on communication networks. While the Federation used quantum-linked systems that could send messages instantly across the galaxy, humans still relied on radio waves and basic computer networks. It's actually an advantage, Dong-yun explained to his team. Their system is faster but more fragile. If something went wrong with their quantum network, they would be deaf and blind. Our system is slower, but it can't be easily destroyed. Above ground, Captain Bae Seung-ho prepared his scout ship for another long-range mission. The Federation had given humanity permission to explore the outer rim of the galaxy. The area is too empty and boring for advanced species to bother with. Remember, Seung-ho told his crew, we are just simple humans looking at empty space. Nothing important enough for the Federation to worry about. His crew nodded. They understood the real mission. While the aliens looked inward at their perfect civilization, humanity would watch the dark spaces beyond. Seung-ho's ship, the Far Wanderer, jumped to hyperspace with its primitive fusion drive. The journey would take weeks instead of the hours an alien ship would need. But that was the point. No one expected anything important from slow human ships. The first sign of trouble came from the Kepler 442 system. Human colonists there had been sending regular reports until suddenly the transmission stopped. The Federation dismissed it as equipment failure when Admiral Kwon Min-seok brought it to their attention. Primitive technology fails often, Chancellor Vextar had said with that musical laugh. We will send a repair ship when convenient. But Min-seok knew his people. Human equipment might be crude, but it was reliable. When 3 more colonies went silent over the next month, he began preparing the fleet for action. Sir, Communications Officer Choi Nayeon reported to Captain Lee Min-ho, now commanding the exploration fleet. We're receiving a priority signal from Captain Seung-ho. Min-ho frowned. Seung-ho's mission was supposed to maintain radio silence unless something critical happened. Put him through. Seung-ho's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. Captain, I'm transmitting data from the Tau Ceti system. You need to see this. The data showed images of a star system that had been completely stripped clean. Where planets should have been, there was nothing but empty space. The star itself seemed dimmer, as if something had been feeding on its energy. Federation sensors would have dismissed this as a natural phenomenon, Seung-ho continued. But I found debris fields that don't match any known materials. Whatever did this, it's not from our galaxy. Min-ho studied the images with growing concern. Any signs of survivors? None. But I detected unusual energy readings at the system's edge. Something was there, watching me. When I tried to get closer, it disappeared faster than our sensors could track. The report reached Federation authorities within hours. The response was predictably dismissive. The water-being Ambassador Zil Nara addressed the human delegation with barely concealed amusement. Your sensors are primitive, she gurgled. You see patterns where none exist. The universe is vast and strange. Many things can destroy a planet naturally. 4-star systems don't just disappear, Commander Yoon Ji-hyo argued. This shows clear signs of artificial intervention. Artificial to your limited understanding, the ambassador replied. Advanced physics can seem like magic to simple minds. Perhaps it was a natural gravitational anomaly. Captain Oh Sung-min discovered the truth during a routine patrol near the galactic edge. His ship's sensors detected a small metallic object drifting in deep space. It was clearly artificial, but unlike anything in Federation databases. Careful approach, Sung-min ordered. Full passive scans only. The object was roughly spherical, about the size of a human fist, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. As his ship drew closer, the object suddenly activated. Energy beams erupted from its surface, targeting the human ship's engines and weapon systems. But the beams were designed for alien technology. They passed harmlessly through the crude metal hull and simple electronics of Sung-min's vessel. It's trying to disable us, his tactical officer reported. But its weapons aren't calibrated for our technology. Get us out of here, Sung-min ordered, but the object was already changing. The geometric patterns grew brighter and more complex. Then, without warning, it exploded in a flash of exotic energy. The explosion was small but violent, releasing energies that would have crippled any Federation ship. Sung-min's vessel, built like a tank with multiple backup systems, rode out the blast with minimal damage. Did we get any data? Sung-min asked. Yes, sir, his science officer replied. The object was definitely a probe. Its technology is unlike anything we've seen before. The materials alone represent scientific principles we don't understand. And it self-destructed to avoid capture. That's the interesting part, sir. I don't think it meant to explode. I think it was trying to send a signal and our primitive sensors confused its systems. It destroyed itself accidentally. Back at Federation headquarters, the human report was filed away with all the others. The Council of Species had more important matters to discuss than the confused observations of primitive metalworkers. But in the hidden research facility on Luna, Dr. Kang Tae-hyung studied the probe's energy signature with growing alarm. The technology was millions of years beyond anything in the galaxy, yet it had been defeated by human crudeness. Whatever this is, he told his team, it's coming, and when it arrives, our primitive technology might be the galaxy's only hope. In the dark space beyond the galactic rim, Ancient minds processed the probe's final transmission. The target galaxy was full of advanced energy-based civilizations, exactly what they preferred to consume. But there was something else, something the probe couldn't identify. A species that built things out of simple matter, a species that used primitive physics, a species that might pose an unexpected problem. The Devourers began to accelerate their approach. The harvest would begin soon, and this time they would be ready for anything the galaxy might throw at them. They had no idea how wrong they were. The first attack came without warning. 3 Federation core worlds simply vanished from all communication networks simultaneously, not destroyed in the traditional sense, but erased so completely that even their quantum signatures disappeared from the galactic database. Chancellor Vextar stood in the emergency council chamber, his crystalline form flickering with distress patterns. Around him, representatives of the 12 species tried to understand what had happened to Vorthak Prime, Zilthran Central, and New Kalari. Complete matter displacement, reported the geometric entity known as Axiom. Every atom from planetary core to orbital stations has been removed. The space they occupied is now perfectly empty. Impossible, declared the star being luminous. No known technology can achieve such precise matter conversion on a planetary scale. Apparently someone forgot to inform the attackers of that fact, came a voice from the chamber entrance. All heads turned to see Ambassador Song Haiyung entering with the human delegation. You were not invited to this emergency session, Chancellor Vextar said coldly. 3 worlds with billions of people have vanished, Haiyung replied. I think this concerns everyone in the galaxy, not just the species that consider themselves important. Before the Chancellor could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency broadcasts filled the chamber as more reports flooded in. 6 more worlds had gone dark, then 12, then 20. Lieutenant Colonel Jung Yunwoo watched the destruction from the bridge of his stealth ship Shadow Dancer, positioned at the edge of the Proxima sector. His mission was observation only, but what he observed would haunt him forever. The Devourer fleet appeared from hyperspace like a plague of metal insects. Hundreds of angular ships, each one the size of a city, began methodically surrounding the crystalline world of New Vorthak. Are you recording this? Yunwoo asked his sensor operator. Yes, sir, but the technology readings don't make sense. Those ships seem to be made of programmable matter. They're changing shape as they move. The attack began with surgical precision. Swarms of smaller craft detached from the main ships and descended toward the planet. Where they touched the surface, matter simply ceased to exist. Not vaporized or destroyed, but converted into something else entirely. They're mining the planet, Yunwoo realized, taking it apart one molecule at a time. The Vorthak defenders responded with their most powerful weapons. Beams of pure energy lanced out from orbital platforms, each one capable of splitting a moon in half. The beams struck the Devourer ships and simply vanished, absorbed and redirected back at their targets. Sir, the enemy ships are using the Vorthak's own weapons against them, the tactical officer reported. Every energy discharge is being captured and amplified. Yunwoo watched in horror as the planet's beautiful crystal cities were systematically disassembled. The process was perfectly efficient, waste-free, and absolutely merciless. In 6 hours, a world that had existed for millions of years became empty space. Take us home, Yunwoo ordered. Earth needs to know what we're facing. Back at the Federation Emergency Council, panic was setting in. Species that had known only peace for 3 millennia suddenly faced an enemy that treated their most advanced technology like children's toys. Our quantum warfare systems are useless, reported Admiral Thalvor of the Zilthran fleet. The enemy adapts to energy-based attacks within seconds. Our matter phase weapons pass through their hulls without effect. Gravitational manipulation has no impact, added General Morden of the Kalari forces. They ignore artificial gravity wells and move through space-time distortions as if they don't exist. Dr. Nam Jiwan stood up from the human observation section. Permission to address the council? This is not the time for primitive theories, Chancellor Vextar snapped. With respect, Chancellor, your advanced theories aren't working very well right now, Jiwan replied. I've studied the attack patterns. These enemies have evolved beyond energy-based warfare. They've never encountered simple kinetic weapons. Laughter filled the chamber, though it sounded forced and desperate. You suggest we throw rocks at them? Asked the water being Zilnara. Essentially, yes, Jiwan said calmly. Their defensive systems are designed to counter sophisticated energy attacks and exotic matter manipulation. They're not prepared for a simple piece of metal traveling at high velocity. Preposterous, declared Axiom. Kinetic weapons are the most primitive form of warfare, which is exactly why they might work, Jiwan continued. Your computers use quantum processing that can be hacked by enemy viruses. Our computers use simple binary code that their systems can't interpret. Your ships are elegant energy constructs that can be turned against you. Our ships are just metal boxes that do exactly what they're supposed to do. The debate was interrupted by another alarm. The Devourers had reached the inner systems and were approaching Federation Central Command. The most heavily defended installation in the galaxy was about to be tested. Admiral Park Jamin stood in the Human Fleet Command Center, watching the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. While the Federation argued he had been preparing for war, "All ships report ready," announced Captain Lee Minho, now serving as fleet coordinator. 237 vessels armed and fueled. "They're calling our fleet primitive again," Communications Specialist Choi Nyon reported from her station. "The Federation requests that we stay out of the battle zone for our own safety." "Of course they do," Yemen replied. "They still think this is their war to win with their superior technology." The Battle of Federation Central lasted 43 minutes. The galaxy's most advanced defensive systems, developed over 3,000 years of peace, proved completely inadequate against an enemy that treated matter as raw material and energy as food. Quantum torpedo launchers were hacked and turned against their own stations. Gravity wave generators were absorbed and replicated by the enemy. Exotic matter shields were converted into building materials for Devourer construction ships. As the station began to break apart, desperate Federation commanders finally accepted human assistance. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Thalvor," came the transmission. "We formally request immediate military support." "About time," Yemen muttered. "All ships, attack formation Delta. Remember, we're not trying to be elegant. We're trying to kill the enemy." The human fleet accelerated toward the battle zone with their primitive fusion drives. Where Federation ships moved like dancers, human vessels charged like angry bulls. Where alien weapons fired precise energy beams, human ships launched clouds of simple projectiles. Captain Shin Yujin's destroyer Indomitable was the first to engage. Her ship's railguns fired streams of depleted uranium slugs at a Devourer constructor ship. The alien vessel's defensive systems, designed to handle exotic energy attacks, had no protocols for dealing with simple metal projectiles. The slugs punched through the enemy hull like it was paper, causing massive internal damage. For the first time since the war began, a Devourer ship showed signs of real injury. "Target the damaged ship," Jemin ordered. "All vessels focus fire." Nuclear warheads, chemical explosives, and kinetic projectiles converged on the wounded Devourer ship. The enemy vessel's sophisticated repair systems couldn't cope with the chaotic mix of primitive damage types. Internal fires spread beyond the ship's ability to control them. The Devourer ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Across the battle zone, both sides paused in amazement. The galaxy's most primitive species had just accomplished what the most advanced civilizations could not. They had killed a Devourer. "Analysis complete," reported Dr. Cho Hee-jin from her research station. "The enemy's greatest strength is their perfect efficiency. They can't understand waste, chaos, or apparent stupidity. Our weapons work because they make no sense to a perfectly logical mind." The victory came at a terrible cost. 67 human ships were destroyed in the engagement, but they had proven something crucial. The Devourers could be beaten. As news of humanity's success spread across the surviving Federation worlds, the mockery finally stopped. The species that had been dismissed as primitive metal workers had done the impossible. They had given the galaxy hope. The first request came from the Zilthron High Command just 6 hours after the Battle of Federation Central. Admiral Thalvor, who had once dismissed human weapons as primitive toys, now stood before the Human War Council with desperation in his flowing form. "We need your weapons," he said simply. "Our most advanced ships are useless. Your crude technology is the only thing that works against them." Admiral Park Jamin looked across the table at his human commanders, then back at the alien admiral. "You want to put human weapons on your ships?" "Yes, our energy-based systems are too sophisticated. The enemy turns them against us. But your simple projectile weapons, your chemical explosives, they work because they don't make sense to the Devourers. Chief Designer Ryu Minjae pulled up holographic blueprints of Federation vessels. The elegant curves and energy conduits looked nothing like human engineering. "This is going to be like putting stone axes on a starship," she muttered. "Sometimes stone axes are exactly what you need," said Colonel N. Seojin, studying the tactical requirements. "We'll need to strip out their targeting computers and replace them with optical systems. The Devourers can hack quantum processors, but they can't confuse a human eyeball." Over the next week, the most advanced shipyards in the galaxy began a process that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. Elegant alien vessels were torn apart and rebuilt with human technology. Smooth energy projectors were removed to make room for crude missile launchers. Sophisticated defensive systems were replaced with simple armor plating. The work was supervised by human engineers who had spent their careers being told their technology was obsolete. Now they found themselves teaching alien scientists how to build weapons their species had abandoned millions of years ago. "The key is controlled inefficiency," explained Dr. Kang Taehyung to a group of Orthoc crystal engineers. "Your technology is too perfect. It follows predictable patterns. Our systems work because they're messy and chaotic." One of the crystal beings flickered with confusion patterns. "But chaos reduces effectiveness. Optimal efficiency requires perfect order." "That's exactly why you're losing," Taehyung replied. "The Devourers understand perfect order. They can predict it, counter it, turn it against you, but they can't understand controlled chaos." The first Joint Human Federation Task Force launched under the command of Captain Yu Sungye, a human officer who had studied alien tactics for years. Her fleet contained ships from 6 different species, all armed with human weapons and trained in human fighting methods. "Remember," she addressed the mixed crews, "we're not trying to be elegant. We're not trying to minimize casualties or preserve enemy ships for study. We're trying to kill them all as quickly and messily as possible." The task force's target was a Devourer harvesting operation in the Centauri system. Long-range scouts reported 12 constructor ships systematically stripping the system's asteroid belt while protected by a defensive screen of smaller vessels. Standard Federation tactics would call for a surgical strike on the command ship. Chungye explained to her alien officers, "We're going to do the opposite. We'll attack everything at once with maximum chaos." The battle began with a human innovation that horrified the alien officers. Instead of elegant formation flying, the task force ships spread out in a seemingly random pattern and began firing in all directions. "This is madness," protested Commander Veltar of the Vorthak contingent. "We're wasting ammunition on empty space." "No, we're creating a chaos field," replied Lieutenant Commander Kim Hyunwoo from his position at the tactical station. "The Devourers need to understand their environment to fight effectively. If they can't predict where the next shot is coming from, they can't adapt." The Devourer response was immediate and predictable. Their ships moved to form optimal defensive positions based on the human attack patterns. But just as they completed their formations, the human fleet switched tactics completely. "All ships ramming speed," Chungye ordered. "Prepare for close-range combat." The alien officers watched in horror as human ships charged directly at the enemy, abandoning all pretense of long-range tactics. It was suicide by any rational measure, but it caught the Devourers completely off guard. Captain Shin Yujin's destroyer Indomitable was the first to reach the enemy line. Instead of firing her weapons at maximum range like a sensible commander, she held fire until her ship was almost touching the enemy hull. "Now," she whispered, and pressed the firing control. Every weapon on her ship discharged at point-blank range. Nuclear warheads, kinetic rounds, and chemical explosives all struck the Devourer ship simultaneously. The alien vessel's defensive systems, designed to handle attacks from thousands of kilometers away, had no protocols for weapons delivered at contact range. The Devourer ship exploded, taking Indomitable with it, but the sacrifice created a gap in the enemy line that the rest of the human fleet exploited. "All ships through the gap," Chungye ordered. "Close-range engagement, maximum chaos." What followed was less a battle than a bar fight in space. Human ships traded fire with Devourer vessels at ranges measured in meters rather than kilometers. Federation ships, their crews trained by human instructors, abandoned 3,000 years of elegant warfare and began fighting dirty Zilthron vessels used their phase shift abilities not for precision strikes, but for guerrilla attacks. appearing inside enemy formations and self-destructing. Vorthak ships crystallized their energy weapons into solid projectiles and fired them like arrows. Even the peaceful Kalari began using their cargo ships as improvised bombs. "This is insane," Admiral Thalvor reported to Fleet Command. "We're fighting like barbarians." "Yes," replied Admiral Jamin from his command ship. "And we're winning." The Battle of Centauri lasted 8 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Devourer harvesting fleet. The cost was high, 41 ships lost from the Allied force. But for the first time since the war began, an entire enemy operation had been eliminated. More importantly, the battle proved that human tactics could be learned and adapted by other species. The galaxy's most civilized races were discovering their inner barbarian, and the Devourers had no defense against organized chaos. "Tactical analysis complete," reported Dr. Cho Hyejin at the post-battle briefing. "The enemy's adaptive algorithms can counter any logical strategy within minutes. But they can't adapt to strategies that make no sense." "How do we make our tactics senseless enough?" asked Commander Veltar. "By thinking like humans," replied Colonel Ansiogin with a grin. "By embracing the chaos that your species spent millions of years trying to eliminate." Training centers were established on every human world, where alien officers learned the art of controlled madness. Federation strategists studied human history, learning from battles where victory came through audacity rather than logic. The Devourers, meanwhile, found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't understand. Their perfect logic, evolved over eons of conquest, had never encountered opponents who deliberately chose inefficient tactics. As word of the Centauri victory spread, more species requested human military advisors. The galaxy that had once mocked humanity's primitive ways now desperately wanted to learn those same primitive methods. The war was far from over, but the balance was beginning to shift. The Devourers still had superior numbers and technology, but they were no longer fighting a predictable enemy. They were facing humans, and humans had taught the galaxy's greatest civilizations how to fight like barbarians. Major General Lee Dongwook stood before a classroom filled with the galaxy's finest military officers. 6 months ago, these same beings had laughed at human tactics. Now they hung on his every word as he explained the principles of controlled chaos. "Forget everything you learned about efficient warfare," he told the mixed group of aliens. "The Devourers understand efficiency. They can predict it, counter it, turn it against you. What they cannot understand is productive waste." A Vorthak crystal officer flickered with confusion patterns. "Please define productive waste, General." "Using 10 missiles when one would work perfectly. Attacking from 12 directions when 3 would be optimal. Building weapons that have backup systems for their backup systems." Dongwook gestured to a human assault rifle on his desk. "This weapon has 17 moving parts. A Federation energy rifle has 3. But when those 3 parts fail, your rifle is useless. When 5 of our 17 parts fail, our rifle keeps shooting." The transformation of the galaxy's military was remarkable to witness. Species that had evolved beyond physical conflict were learning to fight with their hands again. The elegant Zilthran practiced boarding actions using simple metal blades. The analytical Vorthak constructed crude but effective projectile weapons from crystallized matter. Even the peaceful Kalari, traders who had not fought a war in 2,000 years, began manufacturing explosive devices in their commercial workshops. "It feels wrong," admitted Commander Veltar during a training exercise. "Our people spent millions of years eliminating chaos from our society. Now we're deliberately creating it." "That's exactly why it works," replied his human instructor, Lieutenant Colonel Young Yunwoo. "The Devourers conquered your galaxy because they understood your perfection. They never learned to handle beautiful chaos. The war's character changed as human-trained forces took the field. The Battle of the Horsehead Nebula showed how far the galaxy had come in learning human methods. Commander Yu, Seung-hee led a joint task force of 3,000 ships from 8 different species against the largest Devourer fleet yet encountered. Instead of the precise formations the enemy expected, the Allied fleet attacked in 7 separate waves, each using completely different tactics and weapons. Wave 1, long-range bombardment, Seung-hee ordered. Maximum spread, random targeting patterns. The first wave consisted entirely of human ships firing kinetic projectiles at extreme range. The Devourers moved to counter the attack, but before they could complete their defensive formations, the second wave struck. Wave 2, energy weapons free, came the next order. Federation ships that had been retrofitted with human targeting systems opened fire with their traditional energy weapons. The Devourers began adapting to counter these familiar attacks, but the timing was all wrong. They were still adjusting when Wave 3 arrived. Wave 3 close engagement. All Zilthron units phase attack now. The water beings materialized inside the enemy formation, their ships suddenly solid and armed with human-made explosive charges. They detonated themselves in perfect synchronization, creating massive holes in the Devourer defensive screen. The battle continued for 18 hours as wave after wave of Allied ships struck, using completely different approaches. Every time the Devourer adaptive systems began to learn one pattern, the Allies switched to something entirely different. Wave 7 General Melee, Seongyi finally ordered. All ships, all weapons, maximum chaos. What followed looked more like a riot than a space battle. Ships from different species mixed together in a massive brawl, firing every weapon they had at any enemy target they could see. It was completely inefficient, totally wasteful, and absolutely devastating to an enemy that relied on logical combat algorithms. When the battle ended, the Devourer fleet had been completely destroyed. The Allied losses were heavy, but they had proven something crucial. Human tactics could work on any scale if applied with enough creativity. Dr. Cho, Hejin made the breakthrough discovery while analyzing, captured Devourer technology in her research station orbiting Mars. Working with a team of human and alien scientists, she had been trying to understand how the enemy's perfect efficiency could be turned into a weakness. "I found it," she announced during the daily briefing. "The Devourer's greatest strength is also their fatal flaw." Admiral Park Jaemin leaned forward in his chair. "Explain." "They achieve perfect efficiency by eliminating all waste and redundancy from their systems. Every component serves exactly one purpose. Every action follows the most logical path. There are no backup plans because backup plans are inefficient. And our technology is built on the assumption that things will break," Yejin continued. "We have backup systems, redundant components, multiple ways to accomplish the same task. To them, our engineering looks like chaos because it makes no logical sense." She pulled up a holographic display showing Devourer ship schematics alongside human designs. The alien vessels were elegant masterpieces of efficiency. The human ships looked like mechanical disasters held together by sheer stubbornness. Their sensors are calibrated to detect efficient engineering. When they scan our ships, half of our systems don't register because they seem to serve no purpose. We're invisible to them not because we're sneaky, but because we're inefficient. This discovery led to the development of humanity's greatest contribution to the war effort: stealth technology based on deliberate stupidity. Ships were designed to waste energy in exactly the right ways, to have components that seemed to serve no logical function, to radiate chaos signatures that Devourer sensors couldn't interpret. Captain Oh Sung-min's scout ship New Horizon was the first vessel equipped with the new Chaos stealth system. On paper, it should have been detected by enemy sensors from 3 light-years away. In practice, it could drift through Devourer formations completely unnoticed. "This is incredible," Sung-min reported during his first stealth mission. "I'm less than a kilometer from their command ship and they can't see me. Their scanners keep trying to lock on, then dismissing my ship as background noise." The intelligence gathered by stealth ships revealed the Devourer's ultimate plan. They were constructing a massive harvesting station at the galactic core, designed to strip mine the central black hole's accretion disk. The energy collected would power a device capable of converting every star in the galaxy into raw material. "Timeline estimate?" asked Fleet Admiral Kim Woo-jin, newly appointed commander of all Allied forces. 18 months until the harvester is operational," replied the intelligence officer. "Once it's online, they can consume the entire galaxy in less than a century." The final battle was inevitable. Everything the galaxy had learned about fighting chaos wars would be tested in one massive engagement at the center of the Milky Way itself. As the Allied fleets prepared for the ultimate confrontation, Admiral Jaemin reflected on how much had changed. Species that had once mocked humanity's primitive ways now followed human battle doctrine. Weapons that had been dismissed as crude toys were now the galaxy's best hope for survival. 6 months ago, they called us metal workers, he said to his staff. Now they're asking us to save their entire civilization. Are you ready for that responsibility? Asked Dr. Nam Ji when Jaemin looked out at the assembled fleet. 15,000 ships representing every surviving species in the galaxy, all armed with human weapons and trained in human tactics. We taught them to fight like humans, he said quietly. Now we'll see if that's enough. The fate of the galaxy would be decided not by the most advanced technology, but by the most primitive. The species that had been mocked for their crude methods would lead the final charge against an enemy that had conquered 1,000 galaxies. It was time for humanity to prove that sometimes the best technology is no technology at all. The galactic core blazed with artificial light as the largest military force in recorded history approached the Devourer harvesting station. Fleet Admiral Kim Woojin commanded 15,000 ships from every surviving species, their hulls bristling with human-designed weapons that would have been considered scrap metal just 2 years earlier. The Devourer station was a monument to perfect engineering. It stretched across 3 million kilometers of space, its crystalline structure feeding directly on the energy pouring from the central black hole's accretion disk. Millions of constructor ships moved around it like worker ants, each one adding to the growing mechanism that would soon consume every star in the galaxy. All fleet commanders. This is Admiral Wu Jin, his voice echoed across the communication channels. Today we fight not for territories or resources, but for the right to exist. The enemy understands efficiency, logic, and perfect order. Show them the power of beautiful chaos. The battle plan was simple in the way that only human strategies could be. While the main fleet engaged the Devourer defenders in a massive frontal assault, small infiltration teams would use the chaos to penetrate the station's defenses and plant explosives at key points. It was exactly the kind of crude, wasteful strategy that military academics would have failed a student for suggesting. It was also the only plan the Devourers would never see coming. First Wave advance ordered Captain Lee Minho, now commanding the human assault group. His ships, still the most primitive in the Allied fleet, led the charge toward the enemy defensive screen. The Devourers responded exactly as predicted. Their ships moved into perfect defensive formations, their weapons charging with mathematical precision. Everything about their response was logical, efficient, and completely unprepared for what happened next. All ships random evasion, Minho ordered. Weapons-free chaotic targeting. The human fleet scattered like startled birds, each ship following its own seemingly insane flight path. They fired missiles at empty space, launched fighters that immediately broke formation, and generally behaved like a military force having a complete breakdown. The Devourer computers tried desperately to analyze the human attack patterns, but there were no patterns to analyze. The humans were fighting like madmen, and madness has no logic to decode. Second Wave, energy bombardment, came the next order from Admiral Wu Jin. Federation ships that had learned human tactics opened fire with their traditional weapons, but in completely non-traditional ways. Instead of precise targeting, they saturated entire sections of space with energy. Instead of focusing on enemy weak points, they shot at whatever looked interesting. The Devourers began adapting their defenses to handle energy weapons, but before they could complete the adjustment, the third wave struck from an impossible direction. Zilthran phase units, inside attack, ordered Commander Yu Seungyi. The water beings materialized inside the enemy formation using their natural abilities. But instead of the surgical strikes their species was known for, they detonated crude human-made bombs in seemingly random locations. The explosion served no obvious tactical purpose except to add more chaos to an already insane battle. Captain Bae Sung-ho watched the main battle from his stealth ship positioned near the harvesting station. His mission was simple: wait for the perfect moment, then lead the infiltration teams through the enemy defenses. The station's defensive grid is focusing on the main battle, reported his sensor operator. Most of their attention is on the big ships. Perfect, Sung-ho replied. All infiltration teams begin approach. Remember, we're maintenance workers, not soldiers. Act like you belong here. The infiltration teams consisted of the smallest, most primitive ships in the fleet. Cargo haulers, scout vessels, and converted civilian craft approached the massive station using stealth systems based on engineered stupidity. To Devourer sensors, they looked like debris or natural phenomena. Special Operations Commander Park Sunmi led the primary infiltration team in a converted mining ship that barely qualified as spaceworthy. Her team of 20 volunteers carried the most primitive weapons imaginable: fusion bombs with mechanical timers, set to explode in exactly 1 hour. Entry point Alpha, we're inside the station perimeter, she reported. No signs of detection. The harvesting station's interior was a maze of energy conduits and processing chambers, all designed with perfect efficiency. There were no redundant systems, no backup corridors, no wasted space. Every component served exactly one purpose in the grand design. Plant charges at the main processing nodes, Sunmi ordered. If we can disrupt their central calculations, the whole system should collapse. Technical Sergeant Lim Hyoju worked with quiet efficiency, placing fusion bombs at critical junction points throughout the station's core systems. The Devourer security networks ignored the crude devices completely. Their sensors were designed to detect sophisticated threats, not simple explosives with mechanical timers. Charges placed at processing Node 7, she reported, moving to Node 8. Meanwhile, the main battle raged with increasing intensity. The Devourers had brought their most powerful ships out of the station to engage the Allied fleet, leaving the Harvester defended only by automated systems. All ships, maximum chaos protocol, Admiral Wu Jin ordered. Show them what we learned from the humans. What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history, fought using tactics that would have horrified military theorists. Ships rammed each other at full speed. Fighters broke off from their squadrons to pursue individual targets. Capital ships fired every weapon they had at anything that moved. It was wasteful, inefficient, and completely devastating to an enemy that required logical combat patterns to function effectively. Captain Shin Yujin's replacement destroyer, Unstoppable, led a squadron of mixed alien vessels in a direct assault on the enemy command ship. Instead of sophisticated tactics, they simply charged straight at the massive Devourer vessel while firing everything they had. This is insane, protested the Vorthak officer serving as her tactical coordinator. Exactly, Yujin replied, launching every missile in her ship's arsenal at once. Insanity is our greatest weapon. Inside the harvesting station, Commander Sunmi's teams completed their sabotage mission with minutes to spare. The fusion bombs were placed throughout the station's core processing center, their simple mechanical timers ticking down toward zero. All teams, extraction in progress, she announced. Timer shows 43 minutes to detonation. The withdrawal was even more chaotic than the insertion. Teams scattered in different directions, some heading for the nearest exit while others took roundabout routes to confuse any pursuit. There was no coordination, no elegant extraction plan, just 20 small ships fleeing in random directions. Dr. Cho Hyejin monitored the station's energy readings from her research vessel at the edge of the battle zone. Admiral, the station's processing core is showing irregular patterns. Whatever the infiltration teams did, it's working. All fleet units prepare for full withdrawal, Admiral Wu Jin ordered. We need to be clear of the blast zone. The Allied fleet began pulling back from the station, but the Devourers pursued them with mechanical determination. Their ships were faster and more powerful, easily capable of overtaking the retreating forces. But the humans had one final surprise prepared. All ships, emergency scatter, Captain Lee Minho announced. Use the confusion protocol. Instead of retreating in formation, the Allied fleet exploded in all directions like shrapnel from a bomb. Each ship chose its own escape route, its own speed, its own destination. From the outside, it looked like a complete military collapse. The Devourer pursuit ships tried to follow multiple targets simultaneously, their perfect logic struggling to prioritize threats that seemed to have no strategic value. While they wasted time calculating optimal pursuit vectors, the Allied ships disappeared into hyperspace. At exactly 60 minutes after placement, Technical Sergeant Hyoju's fusion bombs detonated simultaneously throughout the harvesting station's core. The explosions were crude and violent, releasing energies that sophisticated antimatter devices could have delivered more efficiently. But efficiency wasn't the point. The point was to create chaos in a system designed for perfect order. The station's quantum computers, evolved over millions of years to handle any logical threat, couldn't process the simultaneous failure of dozens of critical systems. Feedback loops cascaded through the network as the central intelligence tried to repair damage that made no sense. Station core destabilizing, reported Dr. Hyejin as she watched the energy readings spike. Whatever they built to harvest the black hole's energy, it's turning against them. The harvesting station began tearing itself apart from the inside. Perfect engineering became a liability, as cascading failures spread through systems with no redundancy. No backup plans, no ability to handle unexpected problems. Across the galaxy, Devourer forces began shutting down as their central coordination network collapsed. Ships that had operated with perfect efficiency for millions of years suddenly found themselves unable to function without constant guidance from the harvesting station. The war ended not with a climactic space battle, but with the simple failure of mechanical timers attached to crude explosive devices. The galaxy's greatest threat was defeated by the most primitive technol,